Good afternoon, everybody. Does anyone know at what time the next ferry's due in from the mainland? Pardon? Thank you. I'd just like to do a few thank yous and a bit of housekeeping first. Mobile phones off or turned down to vibrating, please. Thank Jeannie over here for her husband and her setting up the, Todd, setting up the roving microphones, and Todd will be talking about a skateboard ramp and renewal of BMX track at a later time. I'll officially open the meeting now and tell you that I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and seas where we meet today. I pay my respects to the elders past, present and future. Just a few housekeeping items. We have a fire extinguisher to the left and one to the right. We have an exit here, but the gate is locked because I didn't think we'd need it till I thought about the exits. There's an exit here, so should we have to evacuate, please do it orderly. We've got restrooms to the right through that door, kitchen, and we've got bottled waters down the back for a $1 donation to Margaret Kemp, our treasurer down there. And at the end of the meeting, could I ask some of the energetic, muscly men to help us put the chairs and tables away? And we have been asked by Cheryl Goodner at the Redlands Times, is it, to do some photographing today. And if anyone wants to write a story about the meeting, you're welcome to, and send it to her. I've got her email and phone number. I wish to thank the officer in charge of Russell Island Police, and the officers on loan from Redlands Bay Police Station. Officer Tim McGinney is doing a great job here in Russell Island. Thank you guys for coming. They're at the back of the hall. We have apologies here, and isn't it surprising we didn't get one person from Redlands City Council to attend, but we gave them plenty of notice. There's an apology from the Mayor, Karen Williams, the CEO, the Head of Infrastructure, and Councillor Mark Edwards. Apology from Kim Richards, Emerald Moon from the Greens, and Tom Basker, who has just spent, from the ALP, who has just spent a few days on Russell Island conducting booked interviews and speaking to residents. I think the Mozzies chased old Tom away, actually. We have an apology from Larissa Waters, the ALP Senator for Queensland. Now I'm going to introduce each guest and ask them to adhere to the time limit. And Belle, where's Belle, Margaret? It's her old cow. It's Margaret's old cowbell from her farm. And I'll ask each invited guest to give a précis of why they're here today and take one question from the floor. The meeting is expected to be 1 hour of information from guests, and then we'll have a question and answer session to follow. The hall will be vacated by 4 o'clock, so plenty of time for questions. Please speak clearly and politely, and no interruptions, please. Travis, our local IT expert, is videoing this meeting, and Stephanie Todd is taking notes, and she will also speak through the meeting. The MBCIA executive I'd like to introduce you to. Stand up please, Ian. Ian Olsen is our incoming president, and he's a ratepayer non-resident. Thanks, Ian. And for my sins, I am the Secretary and Vice President. I am a ratepayer and a non-resident, so I'm not using your money, but I'm paying for it. We have Margaret Kemp, our resident treasurer, down the back, and she has receipt books, I'll tell you why later. And committee members present are, is Keith here? No, I don't think Keith Mills is here from the fishing. He's not well. Brian Patterson, welcome. Stand up please, Brian. And we have, Brian is going to speak about planning scheme changes that need state repeal. And we have our MBCIA advisor, John Coote. Thank you, John, for coming. Andrew Lamming, Federal MP, will be given 5 minutes and take questions, and we'll wait for further questioning. Take one question and wait for further questions at the end. Jason Quick, when I spoke to him a day ago, is still stuck in Melbourne. Travis will speak on CCTVs for the jetty and the car parks. Steve Komorowski, would you stand up please, Steve? Steve is head of the residents group at Redland Bay, and sadly for him, and this multi-storey car park is going to impact on his home terribly. So Steve Komorowski, welcome. He will be speaking later. We have Steve McDonald, the president of 2030 over at Redland Bay, or is it Cleveland? Cleveland? Redlands, okay. Thank you. And I don't know, is Ian Larkman here yet? G'day Ian, thanks for coming. How'd your meeting go yesterday? Plenty of new members? Thank you. Then we have, he's going to speak about fire and recreational trails. We have Mike Quain, Russell Island Bridge Lobby, who was part of Joyce Webb's group. Mike Quain, could you stand up please? Thank you. We have Green supporters here, we have 2030 supporters here, and when Andrew Lamming turns up, which he promised me by text, well, Andrew Lamming, the Phantom, stand up, tell everybody who you are. Welcome, I didn't see you step in. Okay, Andrew, I'm going to hand the mic over to you to be first speaker and ask you to wait for the question time at the end of the meeting. Okay, and Andrew, you're going to speak on quite a couple of issues? Yep, you have 5 minutes from now. Go for gold. Thank you.
Well, you're a star because you gave me 1 minute and so I've got a 1 minute speech ready. Great to be here, everyone. Acknowledging the apologies, acknowledging committee members, Steve from the mainland as well. The federal issues here today should be, where is the mobile tower for the southern half of Russell Island? And the answer is Optus has worked out they have a contract to deliver by June 30. If the media asks or you ask, they'll say second half of the year. If I ask, because I gave the money to them, they will say by June 30, and that is their contract. And I reckon they're going to be coming in a few days before June 30 is the plan. This has been a very long process. Partly it got challenged in the courts, and that added 9 months on because there was a dispute between Telstra and the other providers who wanted to hop on to the Telstra network, and we had to wait for the ACCC to sort that out before a cent could be spent. But there's NBN, isn't there? So that starts getting rolled out on the island November this year, and typically a rollout for an area the size of this island is 6 to 9 months. So they're aiming at middle of next year or a bit later for full NBN connection. Half of the islands will be fibre running right past your footpath, and the other half of the island will be fibre to a node that then uses copper down to your house. I can talk about the technical later, as can a number that are here. CCTV cameras, I mean, not really a federal issue, but we funded them and provided them to the city. The installation can't be done without local or state approval, depending on who owns the land. So applications for installation have to run through council or the gambling grant. They were unsuccessful at the gambling grant in September. They're having one last crack again. But that small amount of money, relatively, for installation is something in the hands ultimately of council. Federal government doesn't come in here and do things without approval of those bodies that own and operate the land itself. Happy to contribute to other issues, but on the mainland, duplicating major arterials is federal money, and trying to get decent funding of Redlands Hospital. You've seen it on every news service this week. So I'm trying to get the 40 million back, which would build a multi-storey car park, an ICU and an MRI, which would really make sure our hospital survives rather than having the life support button switched off. More time for questions, I'll keep it brief. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew Lamming. I think that's the first time a politician's ever kept anything brief. Anyway, I appreciate you coming. Thank you. Now, before I go on, I want to read you a little bit out of this booklet that was passed, information booklet for Redlands City Council. I don't know how we've scored with the new release of the new printing of all the propaganda for Russell Island for tourism, but I'll read this out to you. It's a little bit of interesting information. Laurel Street on Russell Island was built during the 1970s as an airstrip to bring in potential buyers of residential blocks. Although this area looks like a combination of farms, gardens and open space, it is in fact almost entirely made up of around 720 square metre vacant blocks. At the peak of the land sales in the 1970s, more than 80 real estate agents operated on Russell Island. So there you go, what's changed since the 1970s? Now, before I introduce the next visitor, the next guest, who will speak about Rocky Point, Stephanie, would you come up with your briefing, please? Stephanie Todd. so we can give you the microphone. I'll read you this out of this booklet about Rocky Point. It's very, very important. And this was written, I would say, probably around the 70s. This is the site that was proposed as a location for the bridge to the mainland. As, what have we got there? Can you read that out? Okay. Sorry. Andrew, can you read that out, please? Thank you.
Okay, Rocky Point. This is a site that was proposed as the location for a bridge to the mainland, and as far as back as the late 1940s, there were calls for a bridge, primarily to give mainlanders access to North Stradbroke Island and its beaches. One route was from near the Logan River to Rocky Point, and across Canopic Passage to North Stradbroke. And the issue has waxed and waned on Russell for many years, and in the 1980s, the state government released a report outlining development strategies for North Stradbroke Island and Russell based on the bridge being built. And since then, decisions such as the declaration of the Moreton Bay Marine Park in '93 and various state and local government studies released in the 1990s have dampened speculation about the bridge, but the issue still leads to heated debates on and off the island.
Can you hear me now? Okay, I'm Stephanie Todd. I live on the southern end of Russell Island. I have lived here a few years on Russell Island, but I've had land and my house for up to 10 years here in Russell Island. I have about 4 land blocks. And I put this petition in. So there was over 1,000 petitioners requested a safety Rocky Point boat ramp after 2 bushfires here on Russell Island. And we all know that we've actually recently had another bushfire and on the Stradbroke Island, but we've had concerns, here on Russell to do with communications, which I think Travis is going to speak about and another man will speak about later. So when we get our phone tower on the southern end of Russell Island, hopefully that will help. Sorry about that. Can you hear me? Good. So carrying on from that, we'll say we've been waiting to hear from Redlands City Council after a general meeting on the 23rd of May to resolve and find out what's been going on with the transport and the hydraulic survey promised by the Department of Transport and Main Roads. The council resolution was that if the state government approved and paid for the recreation ramp plus landside works, council would not object to the boat ramp. Now, I don't know if we've actually heard back from that. Yes, I don't think we have. But Mayor Karen Williams, she's not here today, apparently she was invited to come and speak, but she's not here today. I believe she sent her apologies. Yes. Okay, but Mayor Karen Williams has said that Redlands City Council Fire Review Report in 2017 did not recommend a boat ramp on the southern end of the island or any other boat ramp area. But nobody at that meeting had a copy of the Redlands City Council Disaster Management Plan for natural hazards, bushfires, flood-prone, storm, tide overlay. I'd have to add to that, was there any backburning? I think that was actually in the fire management plan but wasn't executed here in Russell, or was only done partly. And definitely wasn't done in some stages where it should have been done. Therefore, need exists to have an alternate barge and ferry landing. Sites were indicated at the southern end of Russell Island, preferably either at Sandy Beach, which you know is a little bit, has some mud plains and that there, so may not be a suitable site. But Rocky Point was another site that was indicated and was the one that was meant to be under review. And that was the one in the petition that particularly indicated for a safety ramp at Rocky Point. Subsequently, when I pointed out the natural hazards for Russell Island, Mr. Michael Tate at Redlands City Council said that the sentence was quickly deleted from the management fire plan. therefore removing a potential Rocky Point evacuation site as even an option. So I think a lot of people here might have signed that petition and would like to actually see a positive outcome or some kind of outcome instead of just being flogged off again as just another island sort of issue. We do have many other island issues, but I'll let other people speak on that. We're just speaking about the fire issues become a big one because we have had an increase in population. So with 2,400 homes now here on Russell Island, that means at least 4,800 residents here on the island plus children. We all know that there's been an increase in children at the school, and there's been an increase in children this year using the ferry to go to high school. This becomes an issue because we've got more families on the whole island, Russell Island, as we have more families also on Macleay Island, but Russell Island as well. And down at the southern end, we have more families there with children. Some with young children, some with high school kids. So I've talked about the hydraulic surveys. They were conducted on 24th of January 2019. And they arrived and they said that, basically stating that Rocky Point is not suitable because a 37-metre barge would have problems turning at the land if it's incorrectly positioned, the boat ramp or whatever. So in other words, I don't know if they're talking about which boat they're talking about. I presume one of the smaller barges rather than the Venture, which is one of the larger barges. But a bit disappointing to see that, because some people weren't just thinking of it for recreational use, they were also thinking of it as an escape during fires. But anyway. So if anyone wants to see any more of this about the petition and the safety Rocky Point boat ramp issue, you can come and see me and Margaret at the back of the room there. We can tell you some more about it. It's disappointing that the council hasn't got us back to us or deleted a sentence here and there about the need for a ferry landing site at the end of Russell Island, at the southern end, because we all know that there is a need for it. And it seems like the Department of Transport has also let us down on this issue. Has produced some sort of misleading document in regards to this as well. So the report, I don't have it here today, but I think Margaret might be able to direct you onto that, because we have information about the environmental engineer's safety report, but there was not a geotechnical or seabed report, which you would think would be vital if you're thinking about barges actually pulling up to that ramp. What is the ground there? What's it like underneath? Would there have to be dredging? Would it be suitable for a ramp at all? Could be, what are the possibilities? In other words, that wasn't even really explored. It's been ignored, which isn't really good enough for us. We would like to see actually something done about that. So, just saying that basically. You can come and ask me and others if you want to see a bit more information, but I won't take up all the time today about that. But it is basically all about barges. Could they access Rocky Point? Is the the engineering study not being done and not completed as well? So that doesn't really give us the best direction to what's actually going on there anyway, because we need a draft of a meter apparently to be able to beach those barges there, which indicate, just off the note there, those barges have been used during the Gulf War crisis and things like that back in the past, and they have been used on Stradbroke Island as well and other islands, and they have actually gone up to places where there's been no boat ramp. No boat ramp. Okay, so I'll leave it at that, and you can just ask me more questions if you like. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. If anybody wants a copy of any of those reports, Margaret Kemp is more than happy to email them out to you. Just see her after the meeting. We're at the point now where we're going to ask our incoming President, Ian Olsen, to speak. Now, with this mainland schmozzle that's happening with car parking at Redland Bay and Moore's Farm, thank God this afternoon we've been able to get together the powerful groups on the mainland that we are hoping to support to get what the Russell Island residents need for over there, not what council tells us we need. We weren't really consulted, we were asked for submissions, but they're not going to be much use. They've already made up their mind. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Hello, right, that's enough to go. I'm Ian Olsen. I've been involved in pushing access to the island for many, many years. I started with Joyce Webb on the first public meeting we had in this very hall many, many years ago. I think basically, before I mention Winding Creek, I just wanted to say that really it gets down to 50 years of inaction by the state government and the council, Shire Council, and later the City Council, and now the population is 4,800. You've got to think of what really is the problem there. We've seen unimproved values of the Bay Islands in the last 10 years just drop. It means nothing as far as what we can sell our land, but the unimproved values have dropped by 300 million. That's for Russell Carragher land, McLean, and etc. The average block has gone down from 50,000 to 20,000. Says something is wrong, and dreadfully wrong. Now, federal infrastructure funds are available, I believe, with John Howard salted a few funds away in some fund. And it seems right that we should try to get some of these funds for our island, Russell Island. It seems that the council and the state are in an act of denial. And if we get them to at least start to ask the federal government for funds, we may be able to do something. Now, I'll have a motion for that after I talk, and I'll also have a motion after the Winding Creek situation I'm going to talk about now, about the parking problem. We all know the parking problem, don't we? Mike and I parked the car and we had to get out in the mud pool, and it was interesting. Russell population, we heard 4,800. I put it at 3,000, but it's growing, and it adversely impacts on car parking at Redlands Bay. I think the Redlands Bay people here would agree to that. The council and the state answer is to look at a multi-level car parking place on the island at no cost to the council without examining the alternatives, as these are outside the Winding Creek PDA development scheme, and such alternatives involving closer links to the island would be too costly to assess. Those are actually words out of the original plan. They did not look at the alternatives. So they've gone ahead on this topsy-turvy planning exercise. A new master plan for Winding Creek is now being completed by who? The Redland Investment Corporation. It will focus on 60 million multi-level car park, co-located with the existing ferry terminal. The figure of 60 million is a guess, because council will not tell us, or the Investment Corporation won't tell us what it will cost. The money could be better spent on developing a southern gateway to Russell Island, already discussed, to get rid of the cars. If a multi-level car park is built, an expanding population of Bay Islanders will have to pay premium parking fees, as demand will always exceed supply. Council will not say how much people will pay, or whether people can pay that. Soon, during construction, hundreds of islanders, soon and during construction, hundreds of islanders, many of them aged and frail, will have to walk between 650 and 750 metres. I looked at the winding of the back turns on the ferry ramp and put that to up to 800 metres, right? From Moores Farm to Ketchford Ferry at the Translink terminal. This distance exceeds acceptable walking distance standards of 400 metres cited in their own plan for Ryman Creek. Moores Farm is not the answer to long-term parking needs of islanders at Redland Bay. This is because stage 1 of development of Moores Farm, the Redland Investment Corporation, will develop 1.37 hectares of residential land, and this only leaves 2.1 hectares of the remaining of the actual total area of the 4.5 hectares site. Only 204 temporary long-term car parking spaces will be provided in stage 1, but these will revert to brake trailer parking when 297 long-term car parking places as well as 67 short-term places will be provided. Now
Excuse me, can
yes.
you hold that microphone?
Right, good one. I'll say that again. Only 204 temporary long-term car parking spaces will be provided in the first stage. But these will revert to a boat trailer parking in stage 2, when a further distant 297 long-term car parking spaces, as well as 67 short-term car parking spaces will be provided. So the maximum islanders could expect in this car park would be 297 long-term car parking spaces. You think, is it worth it? So the maximum we can expect, being low level, there's a small risk of flooding and the storm surge, but this risk will increase markedly as sea level rises by year 2010. There's a picture of the storm tide above AHB. It shows basically that a big tide will actually be much higher than it is now. That difference in tide level and that approximates up to the window of a car. But at the moment it may be okay to park there, and we may be lucky not to get storm surge. And there again, because there's residential development there, it doesn't have, it wouldn't affect more people, if a storm surge did occur. So in a way, we look on the residential development as okay, but they must. It's not okay because in its configuration of the proposed subdivision, they haven't included an access way that will actually provide all-weather access, and that's going to be a problem in the design, and we've put in sufficient to that effect. Now, that's what I do. Now, the two motions I wish to put that this meeting calls on MBCIA Inc. and other groups present to write to the State Government of Redlands Shire and ask that they request Federal Government to grant infrastructure funding for emergency evacuation ramp and other urgently needed infrastructure on the southern Moreton Bay Islands. Moved by me. Is there a seconder? Okay. Do you want any discussion on that one at all? Well, I'll put it to the motion.
That's a question.
Yeah, yes.
Can I just chuck out there that another option for parking over there would be have a public marina where we can park our boats over there, so we don't even have to worry about taking cars and stuff at all.
an interesting thought. I was thinking of having an old car ferry where you could park your cars, you know, and just jettison it there. But I think the department would think it a wreck, and it would be a bit hard to get away. Right? So,
Before you finish with proposing that motion, I'd like to ask Brian Patterson to say something. And also, anybody down the back wanting a seat, there's spare chairs near the ladies' toilets in there. If someone will help these ladies get a chair at the back there, please. Okay, Brian, there you go. This is Brian Patterson. Over many years, Brian has fought Redlands Council in court cases and won. And he has done that because residents have been virtually put in bad positions by Redlands Shire Council, then Redlands City Council. And thankfully Brian has handed all his paperwork over to MBCIA and to pass court cases. But now he's got some interesting information to you about Moore's Farm and the car parking. Is that right, Brian?
Everyone hear me over what? Right, what I wanted to say, I have some serious problems with Redland Bay. First of all, the existing land where the car parking is and the ferry terminal, that land is held in one block. Part of the land is in fact reclaimed land, and this new proposed 5-storey car parking building will be built partly on this reclaimed land and partly on the original foreshore. Anecdotal evidence from residents in Redland Bay is that within that reclaimed land there are car bodies and all sorts of junk. So the foundations for this proposed multi-storey car park are going to be very expensive, and that will reflect in the charges that will be made to the people using it. Secondly, I have some doubts as to the status of the land itself. That land, I could not find any record in the Department of Natural Resources who hold the title, issue the titles, etc. So I had a search done in the Parliamentary Library in Queensland. And the situation is that land, all that land there, is in fact state-owned land, and it's held by Redlands City Council in trust for marine infrastructure. I don't think a car parking building comes under the title of marine infrastructure. Secondly, as it stands now, to look at Russell Island alone, there are 13,700 blocks of land on Russell Island. At last count, which I did, 6,649 of those were owned by Redlands City. That number will have gone up somewhat now, but let's say it's gone to 7,000. So we're going to have 6,000 houses plus on this island eventually. At the present time we have about 2,000. So the parking requirements of Redland Bay are going to be 3 times what they are now. So what the council are proposing is in fact not planning ahead. It's only going to cope with what the problem is now. And as soon as they build that car parking building, it will be built, which doesn't solve the future. Secondly, while they're looking at Redland Bay, where are all the cars going to park on this island down here when we have 3 times as many houses as we have now? That has not been looked at all. The council brought down a new planning scheme which came into effect on the 8th of October last year. There is no planning done whatsoever for future car parking on this island. It's not a town plan at all. It's just a series of restrictions on the land that's here now. There is no planning at all. So we've got to look at the long-term solution, because just solving the problem we have now is just, and the council has always been playing catch-up, okay? And really, realistically, there is only one long-term solution, and that's a separate access which essentially has got to be at Rocky Point, which is the closest point to the mainland. So that's, apart from the fire issue, what have you, there is a case to be made for an access at Rocky Point. Whether that be a cable barge or a bridge, that's something that we have to work on. I might add, with a bridge at Rocky Point, Baldstone Horneywood, who build bridges, in fact built the bridge to Redlands, they made an offer some years ago that they would design, build, finance and build a bridge at Rocky Point if they were given 1,200 blocks of land on Russell Island, because they knew that they could sell those off later and recoup their money. As I understand it, that proposal, that offer was never put to the Redlands Council. About 2 years ago, I contacted Baldstone Horneywood and asked if that offer was still on. And the answer I got back was yes, but the number of blocks that they wanted, they'd have to recalculate. So they're still not there. I believe that Land Lease are also interested in a similar proposal. So what they've been telling us all the way along, the state government, we haven't got the money. We don't need their money. We just need their go-ahead, their approval.
Call on Brian now, Ian to propose his motion. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. The second motion was that this meeting calls on MBCIA and other groups present to write to the state government and Redlands Shire and ask that they request federal government to grant infrastructure funding for the emergency evacuation ramp and other urgently needed infrastructure on the southern Moreton Bay Islands. It's moved by me and it was seconded by John Coop. You'll have to put the motion.
Okay. Can everybody have a show of hands if you support that motion? Thank you. Anybody against? Anybody against the motion? Was there someone up the back against it? Okay, you can talk to me after. Thank you. Ian, your other motion?
Okay. The other motions concerning Wynham Creek, that this meeting calls on MBCIA and other groups present to write to both the Redlands Shire Council and the state government stating that both the proposed multi-level car park and Moore's Farm in Wynham Creek are not suitable for Islander needs of long-term parking. Moore's Farm will be subject to flooding and is too far for island residents to walk to access ferries at the Translink terminal. Besides Moore Farm and the proposed access road over it will flood, which is not suitable for access, long-term parking and for use by future boat ramp users. With increased demand, the multi-level car park solution is likely to exact premium car park charges which islanders should not be expected to pay. We seek alternative solutions such as a southern gateway to Russell Island to take parking away from Redland Bay and not add to it. Moved by me. Anyone seconded?
Thank you. What's your name, sir?
Ian Ratcliffe.
Ian.
Ian Ratcliffe.
Thank you. And in the meeting, all in favour of that motion? Thank you. Anybody against? Let's stay in after school.
Can I just speak to the motion, please?
Yes, certainly, go for it. Thank you.
It's Kay Ross.
Kay Ross, thank you.
It's actually pertaining to the previous motion. There is some confusion within government about whether we are the Southern Moreton Bay Islands or not. Some census data actually applies that name to the islands to the south of us. So I'd like to make sure that you make sure that they are dealing with these islands and not the ones beneath us. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kate.
Can I be very clear and give you some background to this particular dilemma we've got? We know all of these islands are the Bay Islands, but I mentioned that and Professor Darrell Lloyd Chai, looking at the proposals for the Moreton Bay planning study, actually objected to me. And I said, look, these are the Bay Islands. So to differentiate, they actually made the boffins in the Department of Planning had what we call a draft Moreton Bay Island planning study. This was later to become the GHG study that ended up in swapping land blocks and things like that, conservation uses and things like this. And the Barords went on after that. But the point is, it became the Southern Moreton Bay Islands, and that's a place name that we've got. There's also another Southern Moreton Bay Islands, but there's no confusion. These are the Southern Moreton Bay Islands, and they should be the Bay Islands, full stop. Thank you.
If I just have something else to add, if I could please. Back in the bicentennial, Australian bicentennial, John Howard, who was the Prime Minister at that time, set up a bicentennial infrastructure infrastructure fund. My understanding is that there are still funds available within that sum of money that was set aside. I wonder, I would like to call on Andrew Laming if he could check, please, whether that is in fact the case, because this proposal for a link at Rocky Point to the mainland would fall within the parameters of this infrastructure fund.
Thanks, Ryan. There is a much better option. The Building Better Regions Fund is in round 2 at the moment. $640 million. It's absolutely eligible to be applied to the islands. It must have council support. And if an organisation here, an NGO, puts it forward, I can make sure council will support it, and it's federally funded. The other money, there's been another government since, and it's all been hypothecated into the future fund, so that money's long gone, even though it probably was never spent.
Building Better Regions.
So Andrew, has that fund been around for a long time? Well, why haven't you accessed it for Russell Island?
So it funded the
It funded the Resilience Centre, but the name has changed since then. That money is available, but it must be applied for by a council or by an NGO on the island with council support.
Okay, thank you. Now, moving on quickly, the Wynham Creek Car Park and PDA Moores Farm, excuse me.
I have a question. I don't think... If there's a bridge that goes from Woody Point to over there to Jacob's Well, that is not the Redlands Shire Council district, and they will not want the business to go elsewhere. So I feel that there's a restriction of them approving anything of a bridge, because I feel that if the traffic goes towards that new super city, the council will lose all the business of the entire area of our island. I'm just thinking that might be a hint, that might be the wisdom of why they're against us from getting that connection. Can you understand? Thank you.
Can I comment on that? Overall, that'd be the winner. To carry roads on the backs of ferries is very expensive, and there's still roads to build on Russell Island, so for many years they'd be in positive territory as far as, and businesses, I'm sure, would smarten up and be competitive with as they got cheaper transport costs on the islands. The ones that are here already would benefit greatly. They'd lose the business over there on, at the coffee centre, at the thing that they may be able to do some type of development in Redland Bay on their Moores Farm block of land by filling it and making more housing. I don't know.
Moving on now, Wynema Creek Car Park and PDA for Moores Farm. Car park stickers for all Simbi residents that park at Redlands Bay would be a simple solution to start off with. Every other person, whether they're visitors to the islands or residents of Redlands Bay, would be welcome to use Moores Farm if they have amphibious vehicles, but the residents of the island should be given stickers to use the area near the ferries. That's my thoughts. Now, the next person I'm going to call on is Steve McDonald from 2030. He will address the meeting. Thank you.
Okay. I've never heard this referred as 2030 before. It's a new kind of turn of the phrase. We're commonly known as Redlands 2030, and that name comes from the Redlands Cities Community Plan developed in 2010, which we at the time felt represented the values and aspirations of our group, and so we embraced the name Redlands 2030 as a result of the work done in prior to 2010 by the community of Redland City. About 3,000 people were involved in the preparation of the community plan, and we still believe that it represents the best aspirations of our community. Despite some people's tag that we are maybe a lobbyist group or even a conservation group, our main aspiration is to get better governance in Redlands, not just at the local government level, but also at the state level, and even due respects at the federal level. And I'll have to take the opportunity to try to remember on those aspects today. But primarily, I guess, we do have a bit more influence and a bit more attendance to local government. The origins of Redlands 2030 was the Toondah Harbour PDA, and the way that development unfolded back in 2014. As a former planner, I watched that process unfold, and to this day, I don't believe there's any planning logic to what we're seeing develop now in front of us. Initially put out as a proposal of 800 units on land, basically. Somehow or other, and I say that deliberately, it emerged in 2015 as 3,600 apartments in Moreton Bay, on land to be recovered from the bay, on land that will be made of largely based on sulphate soils, and that extra fill is to be achieved by dredging about a 13 or 14 metre deep holes just east of the Grandview Hotel. The term Toondah Harbour PDA is a misnomer. Most of the residential development is about a kilometre north of the current port. It's not at Toondah Harbour at all. Many of the arguments for the development, including the redevelopment of the port, in my view and our view, are just specious. They don't stack up. And even if you argue that we should need to do this development, why should the residents of Cleveland, why should the residents of Redlands be paying for a port that the primary users all basically live in Brisbane City? The users do not live in Redlands, and certainly the users of that port do not live in Cleveland. I could go on about the PDA process, but let me say, in terms of planning processes, the planning process used to develop the PDA at Toondah Harbour and the one in Wynema Creek were developed in 2012 under the then Campbell-Newman government, particularly under the then Minister for Economic Development, Jeff Seeley. And he brought in these priority development areas by introducing an act called the Economic Development Act. That allowed the government to override its own planning instruments. So the government has a whole array of planning instruments which is supposed to set the balance on the future land use. The priority development area was brought in to completely override those processes and to eliminate public appeals, public objections, just in terms of making submissions. That's all done by the board after the first exhibition. And more importantly, it denies any chance of launching legal appeals by the community. That's a last resort you'd want to do to fund a legal challenge to these things. But in Queensland, we have the unique situation where significant developments, and we've got 2 in Redlands, are not able to be challenged by the residents in how due process is run. Now, in terms of the federal government's approach, we were promised that the evidence would be used to make decisions. We've seen the Minister for Environment override his own department when the department said the impacts of this development are unacceptable, and the Minister used his discretion, which is legal, to avoid that obligation and allow this project to proceed to the next stage. We're currently in the process of making submissions to an EIS process, which is a very complex issue, but we'd appreciate anyone who's got any expertise in EISs to have a look at the terms of reference, the draft terms of reference, and give us some help on that. Just want to touch briefly though, we also moved away from just being a Toondah Harbour focused team because we needed to get support across the whole of the city, and we set up at Redlands 2030, maybe a self-stated grand statement, maybe as a venue or an opportunity for people in Redlands to contribute to our governance generally, to make submissions, to express views, and to contribute to our governance system. We do that through a range of forums. We do that through newsletters, we do it through a website, we do it through the social media of Facebook and Twitter. We get a fair bit of criticism back at us, but I would ask you to have a look, if you haven't already, have a look at our webpage, have a look at the articles that we write, and I stand behind those articles. I think they are generally, we put a lot of effort into the veracity of those documents, and we make our arguments in the webpage. In social media, things get turned around a bit, and Facebook warriors, as we all know, can take a little bit of the information here, add it together with something else, and you get almost a brain explosion. I would like to refute one allegation that's been made, is that Redlands 2030 is trying to break the Walker Corporation, make them go broke, so that we can take over the Toondah Harbour development. That is a complete specious argument. Never entered our heads. One reason being we don't have access to $1.3 billion. I can assure you of that. Anyway, our reason for coming out today is that we believe our community in Redlands City needs to work together more closely. We need to start building bridges. I wasn't supposed to use the B word, but building bridges between communities. You guys out here on the island, I've been here twice before, and some of my colleagues who came out today have never been here. So we've come out today to have a touch and feel of Russell Island, but there's much more to the island than just this venue here. Equally, if you're ever in Redlands, in Cleveland, and we're out and about, come and say hello. We do meet at the Grandview Hotel on a Friday night, so if you're ever around up there. And we also have a high rate of attendance at council meetings. And this is not a problem of the council, but it's a problem for council. We think that the attendance at our council meetings is abysmal. There's probably about 10 people regularly attend out of 150,000 people. That's not really that good. So our council doesn't get to see that people disagree or agree with them in the forum, in the meetings, because there's no one there. We do reports on the meetings. You can read them there. It was our activities that actually generated the online videos of the meetings, which allow people who don't go to the meetings to watch the proceedings, and I'd urge you all to at least have a look at some of those proceedings. These councillors make decisions on your behalf. That's the system. You should watch our decision-making processes occasionally. And I say occasionally because one of our beefs is the current high level of confidential issues that are dealt with by our council. I say that quite guardedly. We're concerned about the number of confidential decisions, meetings made in confidentiality. And because with the last meeting there was 8 items out of 10 which were dealt with confidentially. Now, we never alleged that was done in secret. We never alleged any other inference from that outcome, unlike one of the councillors who attempted to slam us for reporting what was in the agenda. In the agenda of the last meeting, there are 8 items dealt with under confidential arrangements. Now, that's not, in my view, the way our council should operate. As an aside, perhaps, we're informed, certainly it's only hearsay, can't check it out directly, but when Ted, the Mayor of North Sydney, say member of company's Ted Mack, sorry, thank you very much. Ted Mack became the Mayor of North Sydney. In his term, 2 terms as Lord Mayor, he never held one closed meeting for a council known as North Sydney. We have dozens of items in the last 12 months that are dealt with in confidential process. Perhaps more on the ground, we've come out to offer the venue and the vehicle for our colleagues in Wannon Creek. Steve will talk to you shortly, to express their view out there to the community about the impact of this high-rise car park on their livability and lifestyle. I've been down there to have a look. If you haven't had a look, go down there. These people live in a quiet, very quiet corner of Redlands, and this car park will plonk 600 car parks basically over their back fence. The boat ramp into the proposed will actually put a vehicle backing facility for boats right next to a quiet residential house. And I'm not a fisherman, but I understand many fishermen head off at 3 o'clock in the morning. So that person's lifestyle and quiet enjoyment of his house is going to be completely destroyed by this development. My view is that the PDA processes that were used in 2012, the consultation on Wannon Creek and Toondah, are completely irrelevant today. The number of new people moving in the area, even the awareness of the people who have continued to live here has completely changed. So the consultation that was done in 2012 is no basis for continuing this facade. And I think if they're going to try to put a car park in as the proposal and continue with Toondah Harbour, they should be consulting with the current community, with the people who live here now, and certainly with the community that's awareness is far greater than it was in 2012.
I've just been advised that Andrew Lanning, our federal member, has to be on the 245 here, is it? So I'll hand it over to Andrew Lanning. Please address him politely with all your questions. This will be your chance to ask him about any federal funding ideas you have for Russell Island, anything he should and could help with. Thank you.
Thank you. On just the federal side of things I can help with, I'm actually chairing a pill testing debate on whether we should be testing pills in music festivals and illicit drugs for the community. So there's a very strong debate on that this afternoon.
Hello, Andrew. Natalie Deacon here. Quick question for you. I was really quite shocked to discover that the Australian Building and Construction Commission, when they are investigating federal funding that's brought into any recipient, whether it's a council or the local area, they cannot investigate the money once it has changed hands to the recipient. My concern about that is that we've just heard an example from a friend here, which basically costs the public $200,000 per proposed car park. And I compare that to a ferry, where we needed more transport options here, and a ferry is currently for sale at $300,000. The Wynnum Creek terminal that was built, I bought an ABCC investigator to have a look at it and see if he thought it was worth the $8.9 million of federal funds that was invested into that, and he was shocked. And particularly more so when you have a look at the 2012 council meeting minutes, which suggested that a centre of far greater amenity and opportunity was proposed with $3.2 to $3.4 million. We paid so much more for a substandard facility that we will continue paying for years. I'd like to hear how you feel about restoring the investigative powers to the ABCC so we can get some money. And I wonder how you feel about the LGAQ receiving the lion's share of funding when the European Union is taking issue with centralised servicing over there.
Thank you.
Natalie, the ABCC is on its last dying breath. If the Federal Coalition's beaten, the ABCC goes all together, so it's only a creation of the coalition that we think there should be rules on building sites. They can't police value for money, and that's the question you're asking the ABCC. They look for broken federal laws. That's their job, just as the QBCC does the same thing. But if you can't go to the QBCC and say, I've got a bad value pool, the pool's wasn't worth the 20 I paid. It's only if they have workmanship issues. So you have to demonstrate that.
It's a legal transaction when you can't even investigate after the money has changed hands. You can't do it.
Then it simply falls. Then it
becomes a court matter. The ABCC is to police breaking of federal laws, not if the purchase is bad value.
How can you have a court case when you don't even have access to evidence?
And most of their work is in the private sector, so they're not. The ABCC doesn't go around working out whether public investment is good value or not. That's done by Infrastructure Australia. But with respect, we need to talk about that privately. And again, the money that goes to the LGAQ is. We can talk about that later as well. It's not everyone know much about
My
it.
question, though, Andrew, is how do you feel about money being...
I'm very concerned about it. Very concerned. Very much so. Natalie, it's going to go. If we lose the election, there's no ABCC. So you need to grab on a blue shirt and make sure we win. Next question.
Down the back. Did you scream it out?
I'll repeat the question if you shout it out. Do you have a question?
Hope there's no feedback on this.
No, it's fine.
About the continuation of the path down Centre Road, thank you so much for instigating a request into Redlands Shire Council for that. I am sure that Islanders will appreciate that no end. My question is, do you know when that will be put in effect?
I wish I'd known the question. I could have found out before I came.
Okay,
Typically,
I will start that again. Your office sent me an email. No, actually, Redlands City Council sent me an email informing me that your office had requested the continuation of the path that has never been finished down Centre Road to the bottom of our island. They sent me an email telling me that this request had come from your office. So I would like to know, do you know anything more about when it's going to be instigated?
What's your first name?
My name's Sharon Keegan.
Thanks, Sharon. I'll chase this up on Monday. Just so you know, when the federal government or myself dives into council operations, it's a black box and I can't put individual pressure on a council officer. Well, how it works is if I put a request in about this road, council goes, oh good, we've got this question from Laming. Can we review the situation to make sure we are squeaky clean? It then gets reviewed and they either spit out a letter confirming to me that they have a time frame for this kind of construction, or they will review it and say, you know what, the resident makes a very good point, let's see what we can juggle. So I don't directly control, but I put a little bit of external force, and I haven't yet got an answer to your query.
Oh, that's fine. I just feel this is actually quite integral to our island. It's not a huge matter to anybody else maybe, but it is for us.
Did we lose a young life because of the lack of a footpath?
Oh, not only that, but it keeps our children off the road,
Exactly,
it keeps
right.
people off the road. It would be so integral to our island,
Thank
to
you.
Russell Island. Thank you.
Just shout it out, sir, and I'll repeat.
Andrew, I have concerns about in the paper here, everyone is chasing federal funds. Okay, you're a federal member, but nothing.
Take it away.
What do you do? Is it working? Yes. I'm concerned that all you ever hear is chasing federal funds. What's happened to all that bloody rates? We're paying a fortune and the council doesn't want to pay for anything. They're trying to get it out of someone else. And the other thing is, the report one of those contracts in my life, and I would have been set for bloody life.
You make a very good point, Steve will agree. Your council is just a body corporate created by the state government. Your council is just the referee blowing a whistle on the footy field. But the rule books and the control is in the state government. Be a little careful criticising council, as you've pointed out, because they will control Wynham Creek, they will control Toondah Harbour, and this answers your question about the bridge, the gentleman here who said, how do we sort out two different councils? No bridge is built without the state government calling in the decision and delivering it as a state project, and the councillors just tick it off. And if they don't tick it off, it gets called in and ticked off by the state government. So just remember who's in control of every decision, apart from collecting rates, rubbish, and doing small roads that are main roads. It's your state government. Don't tell the mayor I called her a referee for the whistle. But if she doesn't blow the whistle as the rule book says, she goes to the Land Environment Court and you lose $500,000 of your rates in a failed appeal. So that's why the mayor is really forced to take the officer recommendation.
How you going? My name's Kieran. I've been here about 2 years. My disappointment is I understand the government pays Redlands Shire a sum of money to look after the environmental impact on this island. If that is the case, why is it that foreshores are eroding away to the point where a seat that was provided at a picnic place down near the water eroded completely away? They've removed it, put orange tape around it, and still not retained that bank. Same as at Rocky Point. Before you know it, the power bloody is going to fall into the water, because I've been here 18 months and I've watched it erode back about 4 metres. So if it continues at that rate without some sort of erosion plan, what is for the rest of the island? I mean, can we actually depend on the council spending the money in the right place?
Thank you. We provide millions for roads in the Roads to Recovery. We give 6.7 million over 3 or 4 years, and council usually doesn't spend that money on the island, so you don't get a slice of it. But for environmental, it's through Coast Watch grants, and these are $20,000 or $30,000 that have been given to Coochie. And the first thing council does when we give the money, they call in the expert and say, is this good money after bad, or are we never going to stop this erosion? And the expert tells them, you're wasting your time, these islands have moved since time immemorial, any more money there is wasted, and so council gets cold feet. So sometimes they'll spend it if the experts tell them, more than often they don't apply for the money for that expert advice telling them not to.
So eventually on the wall, rock wall, you retain rock walls everywhere. To say,
thank you.
Andrew, before you run out of the room, can you please tell the residents of Russell Island what you intend to do if you are elected back into federal parliament? Keeping in mind that we haven't seen one thing at all on Russell Island for infrastructure. We still have no 24-hour doctors. There are so many things federal government could give us money for, we can't have.
Well said, Mel. There's certainly a lot of things we could give money for, but what we well know is the more we put money in, the less the other guys do. So it's very tricky. We could start picking roads, and a good example of that is the Redlands Hospital, where we've seen in the region the federal government putting an extra $85 million in. And as soon as Queensland sees that money go in, they then reduce what they put in just to keep the doors open. So when you come to the islands, there's absolutely no infrastructure role for the federal government. We can provide money for a wireless tower, but it's the private sector building every tower in the country. There's no such thing as government towers. So we are held to that contract. For a 24-hour doctor, no one's going to be funding that. The medical centre can apply for a provider number, but for the doctor to be there for that often has to be funded out of the money you're giving to the medical centre, because we don't provide doctors everywhere. Even an Aboriginal clinic has to fund their own doctors. So we provide the provider, or you'll be forced to have an Optus handset.
Due respect, you have not answered my question. What will you do for Russell Island?
So I'm happy to talk about this. I'm also limited by time. What I do in the next 3-year period is pretty much driven by what organisations here tell me to do. I'm not going to be dropping things on here because I feel good about it. So the Resilience Centre came out of your requests. If you want the boat ramp, and I see you smiling down here, could you tell me something you'd like for the island? What's a priority? I'll try and do it.
We got heaps of things we need.
Just one as an example. So the boat ramp can be applied for through federal money. There's two options. There's community infrastructure or there is economic infrastructure. But this money must be supported by council. If it's not, it won't survive the application process. And that's your challenge. And I didn't mean to rush you or to put you in a difficult position, but what you want on the island has to come from you, and one of the great challenges for me is identifying the body, that's why I'm here today, the body that has the authority to make that application with the support of the island.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Helen Stunning. I live on the south end of the island. I still have no access off this island during a fire. The last one was one street that way and one street that way. I'm very ropeable with our council, government, everybody else that governs us. We have no access off this island if we are cut off on the main road. I've been told you can go to Rocky Point. Last time I was told to Rocky Point. I didn't bring my asbestos suit to get through fires. I was not impressed. I'm still not impressed. It would be 300 people possibly living down our end with no access off this island. I think this is a priority. We've had very hot summer. There have been a few minor fires on the island because people think it's funny to light one. Everyone's on tender hooks. If there's another big one, South End is shot to pieces.
I didn't catch your first name.
Helen, thanks, Helen. Look, not an area that I know, but obviously an important one. I've never been shown a plan that shows that every Russell Island person can get to a point where they can be evacuated, and if so, how you'd achieve it. Is any backburning done on the island to minimise bushfire risk? It's a fair question.
Very little.
And then secondly, a quality board like this potentially has to put together what that plan would look like. Is it more than just Rocky Point? Are there evacuation areas on other parts of the island perhaps?
Our evacuation area is Sandy Beach. You cannot get a barge in there. Do we have to swim? Because that would be the case. And I don't think it's running anymore.
So just briefly, so a solution would be at your Sandy Beach, what should there be?
There should be some access there to take people off the island. Apparently it's very shallow down there.
It doesn't meet IGEN compliance requirements. They're not fit for evacuation.
So what does a solution look like? Is there a series of points around the island that would be a satisfactory solution?
Not
beyond Rocky Creek, because you can't get to Rocky Creek.
Not that we can get to if the main drag is shut off with fire.
So if the main drag is blocked, you can't get to the bridge, can you? Right.
We need a bridge for many, many reasons. Fire, ambulance, electricity poles, as you know, are full of lead. Every time they have to repair these poles, they're not going to drop a piece of lead in the bay.
So I'll cut to the bridge issue. The bridge obviously requires the state government to lead it. There's no doubt they will come to the federal government for matching funding. So we need to convince your state government, and the councils will simply follow the state government.
What is wrong with a private enterprise? On the net, if you look hard enough, you'll find a document from the government that simply states we don't have enough money to build a bridge, but we have no objection to private enterprise. Now, why can't someone here find somebody with private enterprise? I've looked. The only thing I can see is overseas companies.
That's right. There's UQ came and visited, showing some new technology. but ultimately it must be state approved, and state will have requirements for the construction of a bridge, and that will have, I think, a minimum price for in excess of 100 million. But you also need a state government to then say, we'll call a tender and look at all options, but that hasn't happened yet.
Part of the problem here, Andrew, is that we are finding solutions as a community. We have found people and companies that have come and put good money here with the full support of the community, or at least big slices of it. But there is no transparency anymore with NDA requirements. We don't get to hear about the competition that we as a community have against other corporate interests. There is no register of interest, no clarity and no transparency in accordance with the local government underlying foundation.
Well, I've expressed my support for a bridge, and I always have, but you need a state government minister to come down and have a look at the site and to agree to doing it. I mean, thank you for the applause, but I'm not in the state government. So the state government has to want to do this, and the rest of it all falls in place.
Your assistance would be really appreciated. We need to have an alignment between federal and state authorities, and your commitment to that.
There's full alignment, I promise that.
Then why have to have the
The state government doesn't want to do it. So you must convince your state government. They then send us the application for Bridge to Infrastructure Australia. They look at the cost effectiveness of it, and potentially federal money flows. But the state completely controls everything. I can't even put a dollar into a state road on the mainland. The state will not spend it. It must be with their okay. The state leads the way here. Would it help if 2 or 3 questions came down the front here, and then you'd all be near the mic? Because I'm happy to answer these best I can.
Could I just ask our people, residents and visitors this afternoon, can we have a raise of hands and we'll mention the B word? Who here in the room would put their hand up if we can get a private developer for a bridge? There's your answer, Andrew Manning. Now it's up to you to take this up with state and council. It's on your head.
So I take it up all the time, but it doesn't matter if you find the developer and all the cash. The state must approve the bridge. So you need to bring your state MP and your minister down here and ask why not. If they won't come, you make an appointment through your state MP and go visit the minister in their high-rise office. But until they prove it, it doesn't matter if you even have all the money in the world. I've done that with Cleveland Roundabout. They won't spend it. We've committed $50 million to duplicating all the way from Redland Bay through to Cleveland on Cleveland-Redland Bay Road. Council offered to pay for the whole road. State government said, no, we're not doing it if we have to pay you back later. State control their roads and state controls a bridge. It's about wanting to do it. Nothing to do with money. It's wanting to do it. And you've just listed all the state issues. The state is responsible for emergency services, health services, schools. Yeah. One of my hesitancies was coming here when the minute I said I was coming, you lost all the other people who should have been here but refused to come. And they've just put a post up on Facebook here. They're just handshaking on the other side of the city on Facebook when they should be here, right? So you can see it all for yourself on your own phone, what they think is more important. But the state minister for infrastructure decides if there's a bridge or not. The money is secondary. The benefits are secondary. The state government has to want to build it.
Can I just interrupt, please? Excuse me. The feeling of the meeting is such that everybody that I saw put their hands up for a bridge. Now another question is, where do we stand on crawling before we walk on trying to get this barge ramp from Rocky Point, because we need that for an evacuation point. So can we have a show of hands who wants to try and get that Southern Gateway going? Thinking very seriously about it. Everybody that's been through those fires, I was down there in the first and second fire to find Channel 9 up on the road, about 3 or 4 k's from the centre of the fire trying to get transmission.
Anyone
No,
against?
go off on the hill.
Anyone against?
Is there anybody against a southern entrance for Russell Island? Okay, I'll speak to you after the meeting very happily. Thank you. Andrew, have you got anybody else wanting to ask you a question? Anybody else got an important question for Andrew?
If questions come here, it's much faster and you can grab the microphone. I've got a few more minutes.
for coming here. My comments are rather piecemeal, but the observations and questions will follow after. It's money, and that includes the barges even over Kangaroo Island, all the ones that are in Western Australia. There is a vested interest there to vote against you. These people have a very large lobbying interest in federal parliament. Now, they don't actually own the companies that lobby. They just have a controlling interest in the block vote that they've got. That's what you're working against first. Now, the other thing, you're all battling very, very piecemeal, and you put your hand up whenever somebody mentions some tiny little bit of infrastructure. Now, if you have all these bits of infrastructure, that means they can turn around and say to you, look what we've done here, look what we've done there, look what we've done at the other place. And you've got no comeback at them because they've been spending money on your behalf. Refuse to take that infrastructure because it's not going to be any good to you later. They can put a car park over in Redlands Bay and accommodate all your cars. Eventually, the bridge has got to come here. There's no question about that. And when the bridge comes, all the infrastructure that has gone in with car parks here, car parks on the mainland, car parks on the other islands, will all just go to waste. Because, first off, the ferries will come, if we get a bridge, the ferries will come to Russell Island, not go over to the mainland, and then those people will use the bridge to go to the mainland.
What's your question, sir?
What is the chance of looking at it from that point of view? We don't need this infrastructure. It's all going to be redundant. Why don't you say, keep it, let us have a bridge. It's only $100 million, which is a speck in the ocean as far as government money is concerned. Build it and they will come.
Excuse me, Todd. Motion up.
Hello? Okay, look, what was proposed is that put it there and people will come and will stop the white elephants everywhere else. Yes, it will, but there'll have to be a study before they do that. And what we need to do is make sure that government cuts red tape and gets it done. I've thought about forming another organisation called GROT. Get rid of the turkeys.
But not the bridge for a private developer would get us all we want.
Yeah, that's so. I think the government should go straight to calling tenders on a set route, and that they should immediately put a corridor in now of where it's going to go.
Well, the excuse is ridiculous. Take Bribey Island, that's hardly anybody over there. And then they've got a huge bridge, and now they're going to talk about expanding.
Bribey Island had 700 residents when they got their first bridge. What is going on?
Something to the Redland Bay.
Just give it 3 seconds after you turn it on.
Okay. The Redland Bay Marina, where the ferry boats for Sea-Link are pulling in, is thoroughly illegal as far as I'm concerned, because I'm the lass that took the videos that are on Google that show that the ferries, their 1 metre line or plimsoll line, is not able to be seen by the decky or the skipper. It's not their fault. That's just one small problem. I videoed those 2 ferries with Margaret Kemp at the back. The first ferry that left before then was weighed way down in the water and the skipper could hardly turn it. The other 2 videos left 40 people stranded and then 20 people stranded. I won't go into other things, but I noticed on the ferry today, they actually had a clicker counting the people on it, but they still have no way of knowing the weight of that ferry because they cannot see the line at loading at Redland Bay. So there are a lot of issues. Now I'm going to start. Has anybody another question for Andrew Lamming, please? Yes? Can we send the microphone down here?
Leave it on and hold it on for a few seconds. You ready? Keep going, we look well.
I'd like to acknowledge Andrew Lamming. At least he's turned up. You see, no representatives from the state government or local council.
Yeah. At least he's here. Whether he's doing anything is another issue. The point I wanted to make is that we keep talking about a bridge, you keep talking about ramps, talking about other things. If you build a bridge, you've got to build other infrastructure as well. You build a car park at Moore's Farm, as a colleague over there has said, it's not a sustainable solution. It will fill up on the day that you build it, and then it will go under in the flood. The thing I don't hear mentioned is the issue of mass transit. The problem we've got in South East Queensland is we can't get around. We can't get around even during the day. Not only rush hour, but during the day. This is having a major impact on business. It's having a major impact on emergency services. And you cannot keep expanding the road system. What you've got to do is look at what resources we've got, and we've got to prioritise on how we get around. And the state government, and the federal government for that matter, but particularly the state government, failed 20 years ago when they proposed putting a tollway through the eastern part of Logan and into Redlands by not picking up the solutions that were offered, which was public transport, which was putting a dedicated bus system or a light rail all the way to the Gold Coast with spurs coming off it. And one of those spurs could come off to Cleveland. 20 years of wasted effort.
Thanks, David. Let me answer that. The state government very quietly earlier this year secured the corridor from Coomera straight up over the Logan River, and it runs into Mount Cotton Road. This will be the second M1. They've set the land aside. It'll include a rail corridor as well, which you're supporting. Just keep in mind that we hear always from the current state government about the importance of the second rail route over the city. And there's a fair point, but that will not serve the Redland line. You need to know it saves 14 minutes if you're coming from the Gold Coast, but if you're coming from the Redland line, you have to get off, go over, change platforms, and then wait for the next train, which is about 10 minutes. So the benefits are definitely for the Gold Coast. It doesn't help the Redland line. That's the Cross River Rail.
Just leave them on.
Trying to save batteries.
I'm doing another setup here on charge.
Testing. Now the next few speakers, I'm going to have to limit them to 2 minutes each, which I apologise for. Some of you will be happy about that, but we have other questions at the end we've promised. At this stage, I'll just let you know again, there's water down the back for a gold coin donation.